What is Geoff Mosher hearing? Well, he's here to tell us right now on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. What's going on, Moshe?
How you doing, Mike? What's going on with you?
I am doing good, man. I'm looking forward to the start of the season. This is the final preseason game here. Nick Sirianni spoke today. A lot to dive into on that, including the first question of the whole thing. Hey, what's going on at left tackle? Not decided yet. Am I supposed to buy that, Geoff Mosher?
I'm not buying it. I don't know what's worse, saying he didn't decide yet, or I think Nick Sirianni went on to also say that before he got hurt, Andre Dillard was having a great camp. If he was having a great camp, there must be a...
He's having a good camp, and Mailata's having a great camp.
Oh, it was a good camp? If Andre Dillard's having a good camp, there must have been certain parts of practice that were happening after the media was gone and after training camp practices were done, because I don't think a lot of people would agree that Andre Dillard was having a good camp.
So, I mean, he said not decided yet. He said he's hurt. You know, Mailata's going to run with the ones. Later on in the press conference, he was asked a question about that again. And then he almost kind of said, look, you guys are watching this. They're playing with the ones. Those are the guys. But Dillard hasn't been here, so that's why. But did that tell you all you need to know about every position right now?
Yeah, I think it did. I got the same vibe from the way he said that as you did in the way you're asking it to me. When he said, look, you guys are seeing who's running with the first team, that was our indication, at least I took it that way, to say, you know, we're this far into training camp. If you're running with the first team, you're a first-team player, unless, of course, there's somebody who's really hurt right now who's normally been running with the first team. But Jordan Mailata is the first-team left tackle. I think we can put that to rest. If anything, the key now is to figure out whether Andre Dillard's going to be on this 53 or not.
Right. Now, does it behoove them to keep this charade going in case someone else calls and he says, hey, look, this guy might start for us. You need to give us more than a seventh-round pick.
Sure. I mean, maybe anybody can feel free to call their bluff on that, but nonetheless, that is certainly the company line that they're going to preach.
With that being said, are there guys who have been running with the first team that are now first-teamers that are a surprise?
Well, I mean, if you look at the three wide receivers, right, your first two wide receivers, in whatever order you want to put them in as far as inside out, whatever, are obviously Devontae Smith and Jalen Reagor. This far, we've seen that Quez Watkins is your number 3 receiver. Now, we've seen him line up on the outside. We've seen him line up in the slot. It's my understanding that, you know, they want to get him on the field and carry this over. I think some people got a little too crazy after the first game that he's going to be some kind of 1,000-yard receiver or be out there all the time. You know, I think he's going to be a situational receiver, but he's clearly earned that both by merit and by the fact that there's really nobody else that can step up and claim it. The Greg Ward is not – I'm not suggesting Greg Ward has been disappointing. I think that just everybody knows what Greg Ward is: reliable, slot receiver, can give you a little bit of that punt return, although he's not going to do anything with the punt when he returns it. He's going to sit there and fair catch it. But the bottom line is he doesn't have much to prove, and he doesn't have much to lose either, right? So Quez Watkins has now kind of entered that conversation of your 3 receivers who are out on the field at any given time. As far as anybody else that's surprising me, you know, I think the offensive line is pretty set.
Hold on. Let me ask you about the wide receiver spot. So suggesting that Quez Watkins is going to get more snaps than Ward, correct?
Well, I don't know. It depends on what they want to do. I mean, I think what they would like, if in situations where they want to be able to stretch the field, I imagine now people say you always want to stretch the field. No, when you're in the red zone, you can't stretch the field, right? And you might be 3rd and 3 and just looking for a reliable set of hands to get to the sticks. That's a good Greg Ward spot. 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4. But if you're on 2nd and 6 and you've got some play action going and you want to stretch the field there, then you might have Smith, Reagor, and Watkins out there. And I don't know who's the slot. This staff is very focused on ignoring inside out or XYZ and just inside or outside and versatility. So my point is, though, that, yeah, you'll see him situationally there to stretch the field.
Yeah, he was asked today about the versatility of the wide receivers. He says, I never really looked to guys at like X. This guy plays Z. That guy plays slot. They're all interchangeable. But it's obvious, though, Geoff, that one thing that he is valuing is the speed that these guys have and that they want Quez Watkins' speed on the field.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm saying, in those areas where you can work off play action or you can stress the defense, there are going to be opportunities for Quez Watkins to get on the field and do that. From probably an inside and an outside perspective, they're going to move those guys and find the best matchups.
I'll tell you what, the bubble screen that he took against the Steelers, that's the play that I thought that Peterson just ripped out of the playbook last year. I mean, you have Quez Watkins, you had Jalen Reagor, and they didn't use those guys in that fashion at all. But he caught that thing and just got shot out of a cannon.
In fairness, that is similar to the touchdown that he did score last year against Arizona. It was a tunnel screen to Quez Watkins, who made a really nice move and scored a touchdown. But I get your point in that it seemed like those type of plays were few and far between last year. Nick Sirianni has emphasized getting the ball in the hands of his playmakers quicker. And then so to carry that over to your next question, I mean, I think it's pretty clear based on what we've seen and what we've heard and Nick Sirianni even basically admitting it in the press conferences, they want to get Kenneth Gainwell on the football field as a pass-catching running back. Miles Sanders is still a starting running back. We know Miles has been struggling with drops on the shorter stuff. We also know Kenneth Gainwell is probably the best pass-catching running back on the team. And in fact, Mike, when you talk about this group of wide receivers, if Kenny Gainwell was transferred to wide receiver, he might be one of your top 3 wide receivers at this point because he's just a really precise and clean route runner, and he catches the ball well. Now, his pass protection isn't very good, but you're going to, if you want him out there, he's going to be catching the ball. And so I would look to see, I think Boston Scott does a nice job. He obviously catches the ball well. But when you talk about kind of that electricity, that speed, that precise route running, and the ability to catch the ball and run, Kenneth Gainwell has already shown what he can do. And he's got a lot. He's not even come close to his potential. So there's some reasons to be excited there about him getting the ball in his hands.
Yeah, so if you're suggesting which running back gets the second most touches this season, could Gainwell be that guy?
Possibly. I could see that. Definitely depends on how well they're doing and how much Jordan Howard might get the ball in close the clock scenario or run down if they have leads and things like that. But if I'm going to try to draw a comp, in 2013, the Bengals drafted Giovanni Bernard, and he was more known, I think, at Rutgers, right? Isn't that where he went? Bernard to Rutgers? He was more known as North Carolina. I'm sorry. He was more known as a pass catching running back than say a power running back. They had Ben Jarvis Green Ellis at the time. And in his rookie year, Bernard caught about 54 balls for 514 yards, but he ran 170 times for 695 yards. I don't think you're going to see Kenny Gainwell run the ball 170 times as long as Sanders and Jordan Howard are healthy. But the opportunity there, maybe to get 45 to 50 balls, that's possible.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And one of the other, you touched on 2 guys so far that have been standouts, Quez Watkins, Kenneth Gainwell. We look for younger guys who are surprising from one year to the next or jumping in as rookies. I guess the third guy on that list has to be Milton Williams. Would you say he's the next most impressive young player so far?
Yes, I would. I think Milton Williams is fair to say. He's shown how he can be a big defensive end when you want him in there to be more stout against the run. Not that he's going to start at defensive end, but, you're on your second string line. Graham and Sweat maybe come out. You need some bulk against the run. He can come in, play defensive end. And then when you're 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, you want to rush the passer. Maybe Cox needs a breather. Maybe Javon Hargrave needs a breather. And by the way, with the lack of preseason reps and these shorter practices, you're going to have to think that rotations are going to be very important those first few games, especially opener against Atlanta. Milton Williams can give you a D end and D tackle reps and really help your defensive line.
Yeah, I was going to.
And Jack, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, how do you envision them using him exclusively as a 3 technique? Does he bounce out? Because there is a lot of talent on this defensive front.
Well, I mean, you think about it. Your defense is on the field. And let's say the Atlanta Falcons are moving the ball pretty well. They got a couple of first downs, and you're obviously going to want to rotate. So you're going to get Brandon Graham out of there, and you're going to get Josh Sweat out of there if those are the starters. You're going to need to replace them with 2 defensive ends. I'm not sure that Ryan Kerrigan is a guy that they want doing much other than rushing the passer. But if it's 1st and 10 and the defense has been on the field for 6 or 7 plays and you've got your backups in, I can see a situation where Milton Williams comes in at defensive end and Derek Barnett comes in at defensive end to spell the starters. but it's first down. You're still ready to arm yourself against the run first and foremost. But if it's third down, Mike, and you're trying to rush the passer a little bit, and Hargrave and Cox have been on the field for a while, and you want fresh legs there, then you can put Williams in as a third-round interior defensive tackle to get his pass rush going.
Friday night, obviously, is the final preseason game. Sirianni was asked about whether or not he felt the importance of them playing on Friday night. It didn't sound like he thought it was all that big of a deal. So with that being said, do you anticipate seeing anybody play Friday night?
No, I would be very surprised. I mean, he obviously played the starters a little bit in the first game, and he was prepared to do it until Jalen Hurts had the stomach bug in the second game. So it sounds like these practices against the Jets, I wasn't there, Adam was. You can ask him about it, but tomorrow, I think, when you're on with Adam, but they were pretty physical. There was even some chippiness there, from what I understand. And this coaching staff takes that into account. And after two really physical practices on very hot days, does Nick Sirianni then want to take his starters and play them in a meaningless preseason game? I think that's the question he has to wrestle with and see, is it really worth risking anybody getting hurt? One thing I want to connect, because a lot of people have asked, Mike, why does this staff and teams seem so reluctant to play starters? And why are these practices so short? And a lot of people have asked me, is that a Nick Sirianni thing or is that a Howie Roseman thing or up above? The one team that does not play starters and has not played starters for quite a long time and now is not even playing key backups in the preseason are the Rams. Sean McVay has done that with the Rams. He has never played his starters in the preseason. And this year he's not even playing key backups. If you remember, the Eagles hired a guy from the Rams in their sports science department named Ted Rath a couple of years ago. He's now the director of sports performance. In fact, he's the vice president of player performance. I think that answers your question, and the question anybody else has, as far as who's calling these kind of shots or who has a lot of influence, I should say, in these decisions. We know how big into sports science Jeffrey and Howie have been. We know that Chip Kelly, a lot of the things that he introduced stayed even after he got fired from a sports science standpoint. And this is how the Rams did it with Ted Rath and are still doing it. So I imagine that Ted Rath has a very big fingerprint into some of these decisions on why these starters are not playing.
Yeah, and, I guess and Q&A talked about this on their show over at Inside the Birds. You can check out Quentin Michael and Jason Avant. They discussed resting the starters, and they said at some point you've got to practice game time situations. And I guess that's them saying that they would prefer to see these guys in preseason games. But how close to a preseason game are these joint practices?
Well, the thing is, I think from a competitive standpoint, maybe close, because they definitely are more competitive than your routine practice when you're practicing against yourself. I've seen that firsthand. But the thing is, everything is situational in these joint practices and mapped out and scripted out. There's no simulation of, well, what happens if you're on the field and your offense is struggling a little bit, like in that Patriots game, right? And you're not stopping the run. Plus, then your first team comes off and your second team comes in, and your second team comes off and your third team comes in. When they play on September 13th against the Falcons, Mike, the starters have to play from start to finish. And the question is going to be, are their bodies ready for that? Are they going to be a good second half team early on, despite the fact that none of their practices nor their games have the starters really have to be on the field for an extended period of time?
Yeah, I feel like as this has evolved, though, teams are, I guess, figuring out ways to do it because the Rams aren't the only team that don't play. I mean, maybe they don't go to the extreme, but other teams are not playing their guys nearly as much as they used to either. So these joint practices, they must be getting enough. Miles Sanders said the other day, you guys aren't seeing this, but we're getting a ton of reps in these practices.
Yes, and I should also point out, in fairness, that over the last 3 years, the Rams have been among the teams with the fewest players to go on IR in the league. So clearly it's a formula that they felt has worked for them. Now, every team is different. They've had maybe more veterans. They had an older offensive line. They have Aaron Donald. Now they've got Matthew Stafford. This team with the Eagles has a lot of veterans, but they also have some young guys who are playing some prominent roles. So I don't want to project or say just because it worked for one, it's going to work for the other. But that is where the philosophy is coming from.
I want to get your opinion on Zach Ertz and how his presence, what does that do for the offense? He was asked today about getting boxed into 12 personnel because, quite frankly, two of his best players are tight ends.
Yeah, I struggle with this one because obviously if Zach Ertz is on the team and is going to play, then you are going to want to play a lot of 12 personnel. And by the way, it's not just because he's on the team, but you have a lot of uncertainty at wide receiver right now. We're sitting here talking about Quez Watkins as a potential number 3 receiver. And Quez is, a nice player, has had a nice camp, but, like the Steelers' number 3 receiver is like Juju Smith-Schuster at this point, right? Because they got Deontay Johnson, they got Chase Claypool. So we're not talking about like a team that's bursting with a lot of wide receiver talent here. So they may have to play this 12 personnel.
Quite frankly, Bosch, you got 2 second-round players and a rookie that you're possibly playing at that position.
Yes, you can add on. You can say anything you want. This is not look. I love Devontae Smith. What I've seen, I think he's going to be really good. But when you look at the group as a whole, there's a lot of question marks, a lot of them. So you may not just be forced to play 12 personnel because of Zach Ertz still being on the team, but it may kind of have to be because it's your best package at that moment. And we know that when you're in 12. You're more methodical. You're more deliberate. You're not as explosive. We went through that with the Doug Peterson era after receiver kept getting hurt.
I know you weren't there, but from what you've understand or heard from people there, Adam is there. It sounds like the defensive line really stood out. Offensive line also. If those 2 areas are strong, that's a good sign. But is that what you're hearing as well?
It's what I'm hearing, yes. It's basically been that way all camp. And, in fairness, now the Jets have issues on their offensive line all over the place. So you would want the Eagles' defensive line to dominate. The Jets have also lost, obviously they lost Carl Lawson before the joint practices. He was having a great camp. And Vinny Curry, I don't know if you saw the news on him, but he had to have a procedure, an emergency procedure. So we wish him the best, friend of both of our shows. So, but they're down on the defensive line. Sheldon Rankins, literally just came back for them. So, again, that's where the Eagles are the strongest and where the Jets really are struggling at the moment. But I would imagine, look, we've talked about this all preseason. If this Eagles team is really strong on the offensive line and fairly strong on the defensive line, that's what should make them competitive in games from week to week. And whether they win them, whether they get the coaching, the quarterback play, the secondary play to complement, is all the question mark, but they should be very strong in the trenches.
Yeah, that shapes up for a good team. If you can get strong play in those 2 areas, you should be competitive. Then it comes down to who makes plays for you. Do you have a playmaker? Well, you got a rookie who should be your best playmaker. We'll find out. You got 2 very good tight ends. We don't know much about Rieger. We don't know much about Watkins, but those 2 guys are intriguing. You like Sanders. It all comes down to how the quarterback plays. And I was reading that piece in The Athletic that essentially said, look, when Hurts played, the offense was mediocre. When Wentz played, the offense was terrible. If you can just be mediocre offensively, they were 3-6-1 in 1-score games. Is that good enough to flip the script? Did you know that?
Yeah, I know, but it's not that easy. It's like saying when Hurts played, they were 1-3. So did the mediocre offense really matter when the defense was horrific and the offensive line blocking was bad? No, it's a new year. I do think the offense should be better than last year, right? Just because it's not dysfunctional. But whether or not the team as a whole is strong, and those first 6 games are pretty rough, man. They got some pretty good teams on the schedule, so. We're going to find out if they can come together pretty quickly.
Atlanta, San Francisco, Dallas, Kansas City, Carolina, and Tampa Bay. That is your first 6 games that you come out. And then it loosens up a little with the Raiders and the Lions. You've got Denver in there. The Saints should be you beat the Saints last year. Why not beat them again this year? So it should be.
Why not?
Yeah, why not? All right, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4. The new podcast drops tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. They'll get you ready for the Eagles and Jets and all the roster decisions that are coming up. Is there a guy that you didn't think would make the roster who now you think will?
Going into camp?
Yep, the guy's on the team, but you didn't think he makes the roster, and now you're saying that guy's going to make it.
That is a good question. I would say
does he not exist?
Well, I wasn't sure Quez Watkins going to make it. I knew that the top 4 guys. I thought Fulgham was definitely going to make it. Now I'm not sure. I still think he will, but you're not sure. But I knew Jalen Reagor, I knew Devontae Smith, I knew Ward, and I was assuming Fulgham would make it. And I thought it would be kind of a three-way fight there between Hightower, Watkins, and Arcega-Whiteside for a spot. And I did not anticipate Quez having this kind of a camp, so that was good. Good for him.
All right, check that out tomorrow morning from the Inside the Birds guys. The Inside the Birds podcast drops Mondays, Thursdays, 6 a.m. I would assume that's expanding soon. I don't want to put more work on your plate.
Nope, you're correct. We will be expanding. We will. We've got some announcements to make. They'll probably be happening within for next week and a half.
All right, we'll be keeping an eye on that. Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Adam is here tomorrow. He is at Eagles camp today. He is Geoff Mosher, and I'm Mike Gill. Thanks, Moshe.
You got it. Take care.
All right, there's Geoff Mosher here on the Football at 4 for today.